Okay, thank you. I realize we're starting late, and I'm fighting the food coma. So just bear with me. I'll try to do this in 20 minutes, but okay. So this presentation is basically a case study that I found in a particular Spanish Inquisition. This is the case of Jerónimo de Liébana, which I believe to be one of the best windows we have currently for the understanding of image magic practice in manuscripts in the Iberian early modern period. Now, the case of Liébana is extraordinarily extensive and complicated, and to understand its relevance, I need to give you a brief summary of his biography, but I'm going to do this very quickly because he actually has a very complicated life, but we do need to know who this individual was first. So, who was Jerónimo de Liébana? Now, we know some biographical elements about him. We know that he was born in 1592 in La Ventosa, near Cuenca, in La Mancha. He was the son of a scrivener and grandson of a scrivener, so from an educated family. He knew how to read and write, and he knew Latin, although we don't know what his formal education was, but he came from a learned family. But early on, he immediately starts having problems with the law. At an unknown date, it is mentioned that he was imprisoned for 2.5 years for forgery, which he would have learned how to forge documents from his scrivener family. He leaves Cuenca and travels around Spain, eventually settling in Zaragoza, where it is reported that he learns magic with two individuals, a certain Dr. Torrillo and Juan Navarro, who we don't know anything about. He just mentions them. Shortly after that, he is then imprisoned and arrested by the Zaragoza Inquisition as a magic practitioner and for impersonating a priest, to which he is sentenced to 8 years in the galleys. And it is here that Liébana's case becomes interesting. While serving his sentence in the galleys and stationed near Barcelona, he is contacted by two individuals. Beltrán des Valles, a knight of the city of Barcelona, and the Count of Zavela. Now, these two individuals had apparently secured some kind of license to have Liébana released into their custody for a specific period of time. So they several times go to the galleys, they pick him up, and then they take him to a house in the outskirts of Barcelona, I suppose belonged to the Count of Zavela. There, in that house, Liébana meets several knights of Barcelona and several Frenchmen, one of which is given great relevance, which he refers to as Monsieur Gunibai. Apparently, all these individuals were practicing magic, and they needed an extra set of hands to help them, and he was famous as a magician. In there, he gets access to a magical library, and he mentions several noted authors, like your Agrippas and your Tritemius, but of particular relevance for us right now, he mentioned seeing books named Clavicula Salomones, the Almadel, something very interestingly called Libro de Senhanolus, Quatrior Speculoi, Imaginum Tobit, et Imaginum Salomonis, and something he refers to as the Picatrix Española. Besides these books, he notices individuals working with magical metallic statuettes, framed as the planets. They showed the confessant 9 figures, some of gold, which were 2, others of silver, which were 5, one of tin, and another of steel, and all were in the manner of figures of the planets, of a palm in size. Once bound to the familiar spirits would be given to each of the people in their company. So they were apparently producing these talismans, apparently according to astral or image magic techniques, but that the final product would still need to be bound with a particular spirit, which apparently we already mentioned that type of particular type of image magic. These were doing that in the 17th century. Well, either way, Liébana never really mentions what his particular job was. He's rather elusive about that. But once the job is done, he is returned to the galleys. But he manages to forge some documentation and leaves. This didn't last for long, as he is arrested by the Barcelona Inquisition next in 1623, and he's sentenced for an additional 10 years in the galleys. This doesn't hold him, as he just escapes, and just runs away, just old-fashioned. And he spends 4 months in Malaga in 1627. This date will become relevant. He travels around Spain for some more. He swindles a Jesuit convent out of some money at some point, and returns home to Cuenca, where his brother was a priest. In Cuenca, he sets himself off as a treasure hunter. There are ample testimonies and witnesses to the rituals he was performing, the incantations he was using, descriptions of magic circles, all sorts of things. He wasn't particularly successful with treasure hunting and ends up being arrested by the secular authorities in 1630. Come 1631, he starts requesting an audience with the Count Duke of Olivares, valido of Philip IV, claiming that he had valuable information of very great relevance for the state and the crown. A request is made by the secular authorities and sent to Madrid to arrange a meeting with the Count Duke. Now, for those who don't know what the Count Duke of Olivares is or what a valido is what we would call today kind of like a prime minister in the Spanish monarchy. There was no official position called valido in the bureaucracy of Spain. A valido was simply the king's favorite, somebody who organically accumulated responsibilities and powers and would eventually become the central person of the kingdom, immediately below the king. The valido in this case was the Count Duke of Olivares, Gaspar de Guzman, was a complicated individual. Historians sometimes describe him as being superstitious, whatever that might mean. He seems to have had interest in alchemy and some interest in magic, although he never expresses himself directly about his official position on such matters. Anyway, the Count Duke receives the request and accedes to this meeting. Liébana is taken to Madrid, and he tells of a very particular story. He mentions that in 1627, during the 4 months that he was in Malaga, he was actually not alone. He was in the company of Gunibai, one of the individuals he had met, the Count of Zavelas, and other individuals, and together they performed one extremely lengthy 71-day ritual meant for the downfall of the valido and the king. He describes sections of this ritual, and it seems that they were basically doing shifts continuously during 71 days, performing fumigations, conjurations, facing several directions, and the ultimate result of these rituals was the production, once again, of metallic statuettes that represented the king, the valido, and other elements of court, and that these would result in their eventual downfall. These statuettes were kept in a coffer and then buried. What he also describes about this ritual are the books they were using. Primary among these books was something he refers to as the Libro Sacro, which we don't really know what that book is. It's a rather vague title. Besides that, he mentions they were using the Almadel, once again the Picatrix, something he refers to as the Tox Greco, and once again the Libro de Cianolom Quatro Speculorum. So some of the books that he already mentioned as being present in the house of the Count of Zavela. And it seems that the ritual was actually a composite ritual, that they were taking elements from all of these books and extending the ritual throughout these 71 days. And now, being apparently regretful of these actions, what he was proposing to the Count Duke was, if the Count Duke so chose, he could go to Malaga and find these statuettes and perform a ritual to nullify the 71-day ritual. Interestingly, the Count Duke accedes to this request and sends him on an expedition with other guards and people of his trust. And during 3 months, they go to Malaga and they try to find this coffer. Now there's a report about this expedition where they find ample evidence of previous magical activities, circles and remainings of fumigations and all that sort of thing, but they never find the supposed coffer and its metallic statuettes. Frustrated, they eventually end up delivering Liébana back to Cuenca, where he is transferred to the Cuenca Inquisition, where his trial then takes place. Now, the trial is, in terms of time, fairly short. The Iberian Inquisitions were extraordinarily effective, quick in their action, but the documentation produced is extraordinarily extensive, and it's doubtful that we know all the documentation that refers to the Liébana case, particularly since he has cases in several inquisitions. But whatever the totality of documentation about him is, the Cuenca Inquisition, once put into action, is able to find ample testimonies, ample witnesses, and interestingly, discovers that Liébana, during his time as a treasure hunter in Cuenca and during his time in Malaga, was continuously producing and copying magic books. And the Inquisition finds 4 of these magic books, 3 of which are included in the trial documentation as evidence. So now, arriving here, we can look at these books and try to figure out what kind of magic Liébana was doing and what can we extrapolate from there. The first book they mention is referred to as a medical book, a memory of some curious things for the healing of some infirmities and other things. Calling this a book is being generous. This is 3 folios long. And it just contains a list of mundane ailments and their cures. Now, these cures aren't all medical, as he prescribes incantations and even talismans for some healings. Interestingly, some of the incantations mentioned in these books are also mentioned by witnesses of his treasure hunting endeavors, suggesting that he was reusing several incantations for different purposes, or the same incantation for several purposes. There's not much more we can say about this. The second book now gets more interesting, the Libro de Astromagia 4 Speculoi. This is still a fairly small thing, 6 folios. Contains a small introduction and 1 single ritual. From what can be gathered from Liébana's testimonies, this was the book he was carrying with him when he went on his expedition to Malaga, and the ritual it contains is the ritual that he was supposed to use to nullify the larger 71-day ritual. Now, the title of the book now raises suspicions because this book is written both in Latin and a particular cipher, and the title contains that cipher. So if we crack the cipher, the title of this book is actually Libro Sacro, según el Libro de Astromagia, so forth. So it seems that there is some kind of correlation or relationship between this book and the Libro Sacro. And apparently this was one single section from this supposed unknown Libro Sacro that Liébana had copied, containing this one single ritual. This gets more complicated because if we look at the magic circle this book contained, which is rather beautiful and very interesting, and we take a step back and look at the overall documentation of Liébana, we notice that he also carried other talismans. This is an actual talisman that he carried with himself, and that is one of the talismans prescribed in his medical book, and they all share the same iconographic language. Although these symbols aren't actually the same, they are all obviously consistent with each other, suggesting that all of these things, all of these books, manuscripts, and talismans that Liébana was using are all from the same source. Supposedly, I assume, this unknown and mysterious Libro Sacro he keeps talking about. And even beyond that, if we focus here on this section of the circle, we see the word Homalion. Now, the 4th book that the Inquisition finds, which is not included in the trial, is analyzed by the Inquisition, and Homalion shows up in an incantation as being the name of a spirit, suggesting that even the book we don't know about also had the same origin as all of these. So these are all truncated copies of this, once again, mysterious Libro Sacro. Now, we can say something or propose some kind of interpretation to the history of this book. Obviously, books of 4 mirrors and 100 rings are common. Pseudo-Albertus Magnus in Specula Astronomiae mentions the Book of 4 Rings. Obviously, we cannot make any statements as to the relationship afterwards. The relationship between this Book of 4 Rings and the one we have now. But even if we restrict ourselves to the Iberian space, Nicholas Aymeric, an Aragonese inquisitor, in his Directorium Inquisitorio does mention books of 100 rings, 4 mirrors, and the images of Toby as being separate books, which are the titles that are apparently put together in this one book we have. And the Portuguese Index in the 16th century does mention a book with a very similar title to this. But once again, without having access to one Libro Sacro, we really don't know how these things play together, or if this title was a section of the Libro Sacro, if this is the full title of the Libro Sacro, we don't have enough information to extrapolate too much from it. Now, the 3rd and last book we have access to, the book Liébana refers to as the Picatrix. Now, this is not a Picatrix. This simply shares a title. It seems that Picatrix is more of a category of books in Iberia that show up in the early modern period. And this is more of a book. This is 26 folios long. This is a decent manuscript. And it's a very simple, direct, basic book. It offers descriptions of 12 talismans for each of the 7 planets. And all of these talismans are described as metallic statuettes or colored wax figurines corresponding to the 7 planets, which once again seems quite consistent with everything Liébana has been talking about metallic statuettes, both in the house of the Count of Zavela and in Malaga. So there is not much we can say. The extraordinary aspect of this book is not its content, its existence. However, one interesting aspect of it is that it contains 7 magic circles, 1 for each planet. This means that even if the instructions in this book were about making statuettes of particular metals at particular times under the meaning of particular planets, the creation of these metallic statuettes was not enough to imbue these statuettes with magical power. And they all needed to be consecrated with fumigations and conjurations in specific magical circles. So this is a bit of a departure from a more naturalistic approach to image magic. Besides this, the book also contains instructions for magic tools which themselves need to be consecrated on the Catholic altar. And it also contains evocations of Astaroth, Lucifer, and Egin, which are common grimoire spirits. So what we have here is, let's say, and this is a clumsy thing to say, Solomonization of image magic. That we are no longer dealing with quote-unquote pure image or astral magic. We are adding ceremonial and ritual elements from it, more characteristic of Solomonic magic. So now, fortunately, there is more we can draw around these books besides the Liébana case. There is a wider context to this, fortunately, that I've been able to figure out. So we have the Liébana case in Cuenca, 1632. He has 2 books which appear to be of image magic. 16 years before that, in the Lisbon Inquisition, have the case of Alonso Carrillo Albornoz, who also had 2 books. He actually had more, but these are the ones we like. One which seems to be one of these mysterious non-Picatrix Picatrix. He refers to as the Philosophus Picatricis de Imaginibus Solomoni e Plantici. He doesn't mention this book extensively because it was written in Latin and Alonso didn't know Latin, so he never uses it. But he also had another book, The Use of the Image is the Most Excellent Art of the Week of Solomon. 16 years before that, we have the trial of Antonio de la Fuente Sandoval from Toledo, who also had a book called Use of the Image is the Most Excellent Art of the Week of Solomon. And in both these cases, this last book is mentioned extensively and analyzed. And we learn that this book is basically describes methods to summon spirits into glass bowls, crystals, pentacles, and rings, which had been previously prepared using image magic techniques. So there is overall a consistency and a logic to all of these references. We have individuals using books of image magic, using image magic techniques to create talismans, but these talismans aren't taken to be inherently powerful. They all require the evocation of familiar spirits that will inhabit these talismans. That is mentioned in when Liébana goes to the house of the Count of Zavela. This is mentioned in Malaga. This is mentioned in all of these texts. So this seems to be something, a specific type of magic and magic literature that is somewhat consistent in the 17th century in Iberia. All of these cases are from the early 17th century. So now, what can we do regarding this? What can we do moving forward? Obviously, this is somewhat of a novel phenomenon because magic studies in Iberia aren't that developed. And obviously, to further understand this style of magic, further investigation needs to be done in several other Iberian inquisitions, which is easier said than done. But there's a fundamental question that remains unanswered, and it's probably the most important question. Are these books and is this technique a local manifestation of European magic trends? Meaning, were other books like this, was this a magical technique or a magical development that was happening all over Europe and we're simply seeing a local snapshot of it? Or was this something that was developed in Iberia given its particular circumstances? We do not have elements to determine this at this point. I've been trying to find clues about this in Amsterdam. I haven't been able to locate them. So far I'm falling towards this might be an Iberian expression of image magic in the 17th century, but it's still early to make such a claim. Thank you.